I wanted to make a full IGTV out of this because there's a lot of information that I can go through about how we can use light and food timing for the optimal health and longevity protocol for our energy and vitality, for our weight maintenance, weight loss, and our gut health, and also our mental health and our physical health. So understanding that we have a circadian clock, which is the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the brain, which is our main overall body clock, which really has a lot to do with the light timing. We also have clock genes within all our cells, which means that all our tissues and organs function according to a certain rhythm, circadian code, and the functionality of those organs and their optimal kind of function, it happens at different times of the day. As you can imagine, there's a lot of things that need to happen. So the brain, the liver, the heart, the kidneys and all that, they have different optimal levels according to hormone release and stuff. And the triggers for those hormone release to get those organs working is really dependent on two things: light and food. So we know that light, we've always sort of known that light and the circadian rhythm is a natural occurrence, but food timing as well will also shape your circadian clock for all your organs. And it's especially important for things like your liver and your gut health. So if we go here, what I've got a number of different hormones over a time scale of the 24 hours, where we have night to sunrise, daytime to sunset, and then back to night. So I'll go through those in a second. Then we have some food strategies over the day. And then down here we have like the optimal kind of time restricted eating protocol in terms of weight loss or gut health in general. So if we start here with the hormones, so the first thing that I'll talk about is the cortisol, or energy hormone. Most people think it's a stress hormone, only because it is released during times of stress, because it's producing energy for our body to otherwise flee, fight, or fight. But what happens is that when we're asleep, we seem to be quite low in our cortisol levels until a short time before the sun rises and pre-waking. The cortisol starts to increase, as you can see. Now, if we don't get our sunlight exposure, and when I mean sunlight exposure, I mean actually allowing sunlight to come through the eyes. So, which is why the sunglasses need to be off, because it doesn't come through the skin in terms of our circadian rhythm. So it has to come through the eyes to activate the melanopsin, go to the suprachiasmatic nucleus, and then basically it releases the cortisol, which gives us that energy boost. So if we don't get that sunlight first thing in the morning upon waking, then what happens? We have this dotted orange line. So we still have a rising cortisol. It's just not as high, and it seems to flatten off during the day. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we're not getting as much energy in the morning. So the sunlight, I don't know if you ever go out into the wilderness or into the bush and you do some camping, you'll notice the sunlight naturally wakes you. And then when you're up and about, you may feel initially tired, open up the tent, you get some of those rays, and within about 5 to 10 minutes, you start to feel the warmth and the energy within you from the sunlight wake you up. So no coffee needed whatsoever there. And you get that rise of energy. So, and that boost of energy is really good, because that means that we're going to have a sustained energy release for the rest of the day. Without it, you get an energy rise, it's not as great, but we also have less energy throughout the day. So you can see you're losing, between those two orange lines, you're losing a fair chunk of energy purely based on the amount of energy that you got from the sunlight exposure first thing in the morning. And that's why I say it's super important to get that sunlight into your eyes so that we can have that higher peak and higher energy reserve throughout the day. The other thing with the cortisol is that because it is higher at that initial time of the morning, when we do have spikes of stress, so whether it's someone annoys you in the car, in the traffic, or whatever it may be, you have a small argument with someone, or there's some sort of emotional stress going on, the fact that we've had more cortisol from that rise of sunlight means that we're able to buffer those small increases and decreases in stress and those spikes in cortisol that we may get throughout the day. So that just means we're not going to be as aggressive, we're not going to get as amped up, and our mood and overall calmness is going to be a lot better, simply because we viewed sunlight in the morning. So that's basically that's the information for my post from yesterday in terms of the story. We have some other hormones I want to speak about. Let's just have a look at, when it comes to sleep, how does the cortisol affect our melatonin? So the cortisol and the melatonin are basically in an opposite waveform. As you can see here, when the cortisol is high, the melatonin's low. That's the first thing in the morning, and then as sunset approaches, the cortisols come down and the melatonin start to come up. The thing about that is, and I probably should have put a dotted line, is that with that, if you don't see the sunrise in the morning and we have this lower cortisol level, that actually also creates a bit of a delay and a lag in our melatonin and perhaps not as much release, which means that our sleep trigger is going to be otherwise delayed, or it's not going to be as strong, which could affect how easily we fall asleep at nighttime. Remembering melatonin is a sleep trigger, so it basically prepares you for sleep. It doesn't actually have anything to do with the sleep cycles themselves. And whilst we're on sleep cycles, you can see I've put in 5 90-minute sleep cycles across the evening there, which is what we should be aiming for. That's about 7.5 hours sleep, and each sleep cycle is about 90 minutes. With each of those, as you come to these last few, your REM sleep starts to increase. So you still have REM sleep in these earlier ones, but as we go into the later ones, we get more REM sleep. So we have a deep sleep is a little bit higher there, and then deep sleep comes down as REM sleep comes up. So to get the 5 in means that we get both physical and mental restoration and recovery from sleep. If we have any light in the nighttime, which we shouldn't have any light between, say, 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., then we're going to have a nice sleep and get 5 cycles in. If you have a reduction in sleep length, or you do wake up in the middle of the night, then what you're doing is you're going to interrupt those sleep cycles, and you're going to get less REM sleep, which means that you're going to have less recovery of your mental and your brain, and therefore that can make you moody and you'll feel it. And then if you get really low sleep, then you're going to have the physical deprivation, because the deep sleep's just not happening either. So deep sleep more for physical, REM sleep more for mental and emotional. So always try and get your 5 sleep cycles in. If we look at the last, adenosine here is the other chemical here. So it's a neurochemical. It's what we call sleep pressure. So what we're looking at there is basically at the beginning of the day, as we wake, we have no adenosine. Adenosine you can think of as like your byproduct of the neurons or brain cells using energy. So it's kind of like when we breathe out carbon dioxide because we've used the oxygen. When we use glucose in the brain, we release adenosine. So it's the byproduct or the waste product there. And what that adenosine does is that over the day, it starts to accumulate. By the time you get to about 12 to 16 hours, it's at a pretty high peak, which makes the sleep pressure within the body, so the feeling and the sensation that you're really tired, start to really increase. Now, if we have coffee sometime before midday, well, that coffee can take up to about 8 hours to metabolize, and so it's going to be masking the sleep pressure. But in saying that, the sleep pressure in the background is still increasing. The thing about it is that the caffeine binds to the same receptor in the brain as the adenosine, which blocks it out. So it doesn't actually attach to the receptor, but it's still pooling in the background. Once the coffee metabolizes, the adenosine then floods the receptors and you get this big crash, and that's where the crash comes from. Now, if we have caffeine too late after midday and you're sensitive to caffeine, then basically you're going to have that sort of sleep pressure still going up in the evening, but it's also going to affect your ability to fall asleep because you're taking away the sleep pressure that is meant to be sending you to sleep until the caffeine wears off, then you'll crash. So that can really interrupt your sleep and delay the onset of your sleep cycles. So the last one is the insulin and the gut motility, which brings us on to how food and the timing of food is really important. So most of the food stuff is here, and a lot of the research I've been doing is on time-restricted eating. And time-restricted eating is basically allowing yourself to have a long enough fasting period from the moment you finish dinner to the moment you have breakfast. And if we go here on our time-restricted eating, we will see that for gut health and weight loss and just your general microbiota of your gut, 12 to 16 hours is the most optimal range of fasting. So that means that you finish dinner at say 6 p.m. and you don't have anything until 6 a.m. That would be a 12-hour fast. 12 hours is quite easy to do. But as you can see, as you go from 12 to 13 to 14 to 15 to 16, we start to get a rise in the fat burning process and the gut healing process. And so the optimal fasted state period is about 16 hours. If we go beyond that, which we can do for longer fasts, but not on a consistent basis, that means like every day, but maybe like once every few months, that's okay. But if it's a consistent daily routine, 16 hours is the optimal. If you go beyond that, you start to get some suboptimal occurrences there. And in fact, the hormones start to change a little bit and we can actually go into more of a weight gain and process there. So 12 to 16 hours, aim for 12, but if you can drag it out to 13, 14, every hour you can drag it out to 16, it starts to increase the gut health, the gut recovery, and also for weight loss there. Because that's your fat burning zone. So when there's no food in the belly, that's your fat burning. As soon as you have a calorie, whether that's a milky coffee or a black coffee with sugar, and you get those calories, you break the fast. Okay, and that's why it's called breakfast. You're breaking your fast, and basically that is then turning the hormones on to basically start metabolizing food, and you go back into that fat storage mode, which is what happens during the day when we're eating food. So a few things with eating food during the day. We want to basically try and hold off at least 1 hour from waking before you have your coffee or your food. Okay, and then just let yourself wake up, go for a 20-30 minute walk and get that sunrise, let that wake you up naturally. Then you can have your coffee, and that one coffee will then give you energy sustenance for the day. You probably won't need to have another one. In terms of breakfast, lunch and dinner, you can see the calorie load. We like to front load it because the insulin level is a lot higher and the gut motility is higher. It means that when we have a bigger breakfast, we can support the glucose coming in and the higher load of food coming in, so that our gut motility is higher, so it will process it quicker and we'll be able to absorb, and our blood sugar won't spike as much. Lunchtime, moderate, and then dinner we keep quite low in terms of its calorie loading because the gut motility has started to really slow down, the insulin has slowed down, which means that if you have a big dinner and it may have a fair bit of carbs and things like that, well then basically it's going to take a lot longer into the night to digest. What that means is that your fasted state, which generally takes about 3 to 4 hours, may take more like 5 to 6, so that your fasted state of what you think may be 12 hours has been delayed and it may only be 10 hours. So you're not getting that gut healing and the fat burning as much because you've had a big meal at nighttime. The same thing goes for if you finish dinner at 6, but you have a little bit of chocolate at 8, 9, or 10, well, that starts the fat storage mode, your hormones come back on, you're digesting again, so your fasted state won't start for another 3 to 4, maybe 5 hours after that bit of chocolate, and so then again, you've really tapped out of your fat burning zone, you've tapped out of your gut health and recovery and maintenance. And so those late night snacks are doing you a lot of damage for that reason. The main things after dinner, you can only have water or green or like herbal teas, but no sugar, no honey, no things like that. It has to just be water based, and then absolutely no light. As soon as you have light after 10 p.m. to 4 a.m., the studies show that there is nothing more sort of damning to your longevity and health than viewing sunlight or any sort of artificial light in the evening. Okay, it's probably the biggest risk factor. It's actually determined to be carcinogenic. So the last bit is that consistency really matters, and you can see here I've got cardio and strength, just in terms of hormonal programming, but it's not as important. It's more about the individual and how they prefer to train. But our body is generally adapted to cardiovascular exercise a little bit more in the morning, and our growth hormones and levels and testosterone levels start to peak around the 4 o'clock mark. So your strength training, you're going to be a little bit stronger in that time of the day, especially in terms of even reflexes and things like that. Proprioception and just injury risk is also a bit lower at that time of the day due to a number of the hormonal factors that kick in. And so that's basically I've gone through everything there. And that basically shows you how light and food affects our circadian code, and how if we eat and observe light according to our natural circadian rhythm, then we're going to produce optimal function, health, and that's going to lead us towards a long and happy life. And our emotions will be better, our physical health will be better, our mental health will be better. I hope you found that really interesting. I love this kind of stuff, so I really do. And if you have any questions, just drop it in the comments below. Thanks for watching.